one of the things we've covered here quite regularly, I think almost every single day, is this. It's an attack on women. It's an attack on women's sports, and it's just so wild to me that we even have to have this conversation on basic biology and science. And one of the questions that always is in my mind is, why is it that women are the ones? Why are women the ones who have to compromise everything? Why are women the ones that are supposed to give up everything from medals at different events and this and that and spaces? It seems incredibly unfair as it is. And of course, this really got kickstarted with the whole story about Leah Thomas, the swim team in Pennsylvania, and with Riley Gaines, because she was one of the first to speak out against this. And I think up until that time, a lot of women, even though we live in this era of so-called empowerment, a lot of women felt afraid to speak out, because when you see women speak out about these things, they are harassed nonstop. They're called TERFs, which is a sexual slur. They have a lot of misogyny directed towards them, and it gets violent, very violent sometimes. We had video of Gaines. She was speaking at an event in California, and she was like chased into a classroom because the Trantifa were outside, and they were incredibly loud and incredibly intimidating, and anybody would have been worried for their safety. Well, since then, Gaines has been incredibly busy, and she's now the director of the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute, and she joins us now via Skype. Riley, appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for everything that you're doing, because like I said, I had a cousin at a school in Missouri, and they literally went through this whole thing. She was an athlete. It was in Hillsborough, Missouri, and there was an 18-year-old male that was demanding to share locker room space with this family member of ours. These were minor girls, and this was right after you really started speaking out. And I think I really do mean that. I think a lot of women, especially girls in school, didn't really know how to deal with this because of the pushback they were getting. Have you obviously, from your perspective, you've seen a huge change in this?
Certainly. But I will say that pushback is very real. What I went through at my university, what they told us, it's really nothing short of criminal. The amount of emotional blackmail, gaslighting that they put us through. They told us, if we spoke out, it's something that would follow us forever. You'll be labeled a transphobe forever. You will never get a job. You will never get into grad school. You'll lose your friends. You'll lose your scholarship and your playing time. When we were concerned about the locker room, specifically Leah Thomas's teammates, actually, and they sent an email to their administration expressing their discomfort. 16 of these girls signed on to this email, as well as their parents. Their university responded back with, if you feel uncomfortable seeing male genitalia, here's some counseling resources that you should seek in an attempt to re-educate yourself. They told these girls, you're not allowed to take a stance because your school has already taken your stance for you. They told us that if we did happen to speak out and any harm whatsoever were to come towards Thomas's way, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, through social media, whatever that harm looked like, they told us that we would be solely responsible, and we would be responsible for a potential death. And that would make us a murderer. And you don't want to be a murderer, do you? Of
Wow.
course not. Who would want to be a murderer? But that's what they use to keep us quiet.
The abuse, it's so incredibly abusive. Riley, why is it that if a man feels uncomfortable, if he wants to say that he's a woman, and if he feels uncomfortable in men's spaces or on men's teams, he's accommodated. But if women feel uncomfortable having their spaces or their teams invaded by a man, they're told to just, everything that you just described. They're threatened, they're blackmailed, they're told they have to do this. They aren't accommodated. They're just told to step aside. I thought that, we lived in this empowerment equality era. Doesn't sound like it. Why is there this difference?
Look, this is the patriarchy, right? This is everything that once, again, really not to even make this issue political, because what I've noticed is it really isn't a political issue.
Right.
The overwhelming majority of people agree on this, actually. You wouldn't know it if you just watched the news and saw how politicians voted. But despite that, this is coming from the party that once championed themselves on advocating for women and fighting for women's rights. Yeah, forget that. Now we have the same administration, these same people, they can't even define what a woman is. But make no mistake, this isn't just women's sports. Notice the language that we're using. It's only changing as it pertains to women. Why is
Mm.
mother deemed offensive? Why are we, as women, why are we called menstruators or cervix havers, uterus owners? Most recently, by Mr. Rachel Levine, a Biden appointee, we're called egg producers. And again, this is happening one way. Why aren't we calling men, which I'm not advocating for this, why aren't we calling men sperm producers?
Right.
Or, to be totally frank, erection havers? Because we know that sounds so silly, but it's totally okay to reduce a woman down to her biological function.
Mm.
Same thing in prisons. Why aren't, women who identify as men going into men's prisons or joining men's fraternities? This is only happening one way, and it shows who's really at jeopardy in regards to a lot of this gender ideology propaganda, and that's specifically women and specifically children as it pertains to the education system for sure.
Yeah, we're talking with Riley Gaines. There was a story that we'd actually talked about on air a couple of weeks ago, and it was this woman who finally felt comfortable enough. She's in the UK. She came forward. She was saying that she didn't get into the nature of her surgery, but it sounded like it was a very serious surgery that she had to have immediately. She had gone in. Our doctors were very concerned. But when she was there was a man who was dressed as a nurse who came in, and it made her feel very uncomfortable considering the female intimate nature of her surgery and her procedure that she was getting ready to go through. And she had voiced a concern, and then they had canceled her surgery. This was in the Daily Mail. They had canceled her surgery, and it ended up complicating it. It got worse, and it made it a lot worse for her when she finally was able to go in. There was a firestorm of support in her favor. But you had mentioned, Rachel Levine, a man who is dressing and wants to identify as a woman, but who's also over at HHS, which is bizarre to me because I feel like that is the politicization of health. Do you feel that if you had not stood up in the way that you did and pushed back and encouraged other women to push back, do you think that we were on a road to start seeing this sort of discrimination against women, even in healthcare, like this one story?
Certainly. And you're right to call it broader than just sports. When I was first impacted, I only saw it as sports, but now that I've taken a step back and see this for what it really is, you're exactly right. This is a war on women. And it's a slippery slope. That's what we're seeing. I think a lot of people are becoming aware to the fact of how slippery this slope really is, which is why more and more people are becoming more bold. They're becoming more empowered to state the obvious. Really, what I'm saying, what you're saying, it shouldn't require courage to say these things. It's the most basic of truths that we know as humans, man and woman. It's the essence of humanity. It's how we're all here. And they're asking us to deny that, which is a pretty Orwellian thought. They want us to say 2 + 2 is 5. And we know it's not. But so many of us, whether that be coaches, whether that be medical professionals, whether that be people in the church, pastors, preachers, we're adhering. We're saying 2 + 2 is 5, and we can't continue to do that, or it's just a matter of time before it's the next thing.
Hmm.
And again, I know that sounds grim. I know that sounds almost conspiracist, right? But truly, would you have imagined 5 years ago we'd be here where we're at now?
Not
No,
at all. Not
no,
at
and
all.
I think it's important to look into the future about where this could potentially lead us.
I have to ask you about your dust up that you had with Keith Olbermann. It has to. I get mad for you when I see this sort of abuse directed at you. I'm not surprised who it comes from, but this is just one of a long line of people who they tried to say that because you had tied with Leah Thomas and you which they and as I remember they gave him the trophy, but you didn't actually get one, which I thought was also unfair. It's a whole other thing. But Keith Olbermann had responded to something that you had said because you were talking about women's Bill of Rights, and he accused you of just sucking at swimming, which I thought was an incredibly ironic and misogynistic response to your efforts to do everything that we're talking about here. That I know that has to make you mad. How do you deal? You're a young woman. How do you deal with that? And then what do you tell through your leadership institute? Because that's a hard thing for women to have to deal with. Young women who are coming up, whether it's in sports or whether it's in the workplace, this is the kind of stuff that they have to deal with. I mean, it just makes me want to slap everybody. How are you talking to women to respond to this?
I'm very fortunate that I'm secure with myself. I know my intentions. I know my heart. I know there's no hate in my heart anywhere. And so when someone like Keith, who worked at ESPN, right? I mean, someone who is supposed to understand sports, what I've accomplished in my sport, being a 12-time All-American, I'm actually still the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, one of the fastest Americans of all time. I mean, as you mentioned, that's just blatant misogyny to say I'm bad at swimming. So I'm fortunate that that does not hurt my feelings by any means. I'll put it on the record right here. I would love to challenge him to a race. It might actually disprove my argument, so maybe it wouldn't be good for me because I do think I could take him in the pool. Um, but what I would say to other women, which is why I launched the Riley Gaines Center through the Leadership Institute, we need more leaders. We need more people to be unapologetic and standing firm in the truth. That's what my center will do. It's a training program where we are going to inspire and embolden and provide resources and support to
It's a
individuals who,
sisterhood.
yeah, absolutely. It certainly is. And that's what my sport was to me for so long. And so I want to create that for other girls so they feel confident to know that we're in the overwhelming majority. We really are. And to know just how crucial it is to do what's right, do what's just, and again, do what's true.
Good for you for that, because I know a lot of, especially now, women need a sisterhood, and especially coming up with all of this stuff now, they've needed it now more than ever. Riley Gaines, you can find her at the website is RileyGainesCenter.org, the Riley Gaines Center at the Leadership Institute. Congratulations on your well fought and ongoing fight, and for inspiring an army of women to stand up there with you, because that's what it's going to take. Appreciate what you do. Thanks for joining us
Thank
today.
you very much.
Of course.